So it's 1 o'clock, and at this point, we'll start this Redefining Ready, Reimagining Shen session. The purpose of the session is to provide a lot of information related to the planning for reopening to our teachers, to our parents. Consequently, we developed several sessions like this to provide information. We also completed a survey to garner feedback, and hopefully many, if not all, of the questions that were posed in the survey, as well as questions that were recently posed through the Inside Shen email, will be addressed as a part of this presentation as well. At the end of the session, Mrs. DeFisciani, who's collecting those questions, she's now going through the questions and comparing to our presentation. And if there are things or items or questions that were asked that we did not, or we don't think we have addressed in this, we'll try to address those questions at the end of this session as well. We have to recognize that this is a process. What we're discussing today on July 21st I'm not going to say may, it will be different, because every day different interpretations of be it law, regulations, different assessment of feasibility of practice is being reviewed and analyzed. And so what we are planning in July is, yes, planning for September. However, we recognize that this is an evolving process. I say that respectfully because at times people want to know what's the final thing we're going to do. This is a truly a work in progress, and it's one that we have expended a lot of time and energy to be at this point, and we recognize that is still yet a lot of work to be done as we move forward. So at this point, I'm going to present my screen, which is a presentation that we have been working on to capture, in essence, all the dimensions of the plan that we're in the process of doing right now. So as you will see, and I'm going to ask Dr. Wood to inform me if she can see my screen. Can you see?
Yes, I see it.
So I'm going to put this presentation into presentation mode. And my apologies here, folks. So one of the things that we've been really focused on is how do we use this as an opportunity to reimagine the things that we do as a school district. And certainly the state regulations emphasize the importance of maximizing opportunities for in-person learning. And we have been focused on maximizing opportunities for in-purpose learning as a part of our framework. So what I'll be doing for the next 30 minutes here is to overview of our framework. Then we will go, Dr. Wood will transition to overview of instructional programming, and she will have a facilitated conversations with those who are leading the program planning at the respective level. At the elementary level, we have Aranjan Principal Andy Hills and Tasago Principal Greg Pace. At the middle school level, we have Gowana Principal Robin Gories. And at the high school level, we have High School Principal Ron Agustinoni. And then, as I noted before, questions that are submitted, Mrs. DeFisciani is going through those questions now to see the difference between questions that we already received, as well as information that we think will be covered as a part of this presentation, and try to address those questions at the end, recognizing that this is one of several opportunities that we'll be engaging individuals as we plan ahead. So the first slide, I just want to emphasize to folks, and I won't necessarily go into great detail, that everything that we do in the school district comes back to the whole notion of how do we assess our needs through the equity lens? In other words, how do we ensure that we are understanding and addressing the various needs of our students? How do we ensure that we're being inclusive in terms of asking what else can we need to do? How do we ensure that we're being diverse in terms of recognizing the different cultural shifts that's taking place and capitalizing on the various changes? And certainly right now is a time where capitalizing on changes is a major focus. And then the last piece, how we ensure that we're being axiomatic in terms of truly addressing, trying to address all the needs of all students effectively. So those are the three questions that drive what a lot of things that we do. So essentially, what we've been doing over the last several weeks and months is trying to, using this symbolic notion of trying to figure out where do we put up the various tent posts and try to then figure out what goes underneath the tents. And so in order to do that, we needed a lot of guidelines and guardrails. And I use those two terms very specifically because guidelines turn into, these are the mandatory things that we do. Guardrails give us some wiggle room in terms of where we have flexibility to make some decisions as we move forward. The governor's office is one of 4 entities that have been, quite frankly, impacting this conversation in a very significant way. Recently, the governor came out with guidelines in terms of school opening, where basically saying a daily infection rate, if their rate is 5% or less over a 14-day period, the announcement will probably be schools can open. If we ever have a situation where regionally the infection rate goes greater than 9%, schools will be closed. So at this point, while we're in the process of planning and putting plans together, it's important to emphasize that a final decision in terms of will we actually have school in terms of on-site capacity, or will we be forced to have all virtual capacity, that decision will be made by the governor's office during the week of August 1st through the 7th. So it's important for people to realize that while we're in the process of putting our plans, submitting our plans, the governor's office is still the one to make that final decision in terms of will schools open or not as we move forward. The second piece of the governor's recent announcement was basically saying that leaving the specific plans up to school districts, which then leads to the state education department. The state education department is in the process now of looking not only at guidance for school reopening, but also looking at various regulations, what we call the guardrails then, regulations that need to change in order for us to reimagine education. Some of those things are easily done. Some of those things are tremendously complex. This slide is just an indication of some. There are many, many, many regulations that's being reviewed and changed right now. However, these are some of the salient ones. The unit of study in terms of the number of minutes of instructional time, science labs, AIS, health streaming, home instruction. These are just a sampling of the regulations that the state education department is looking at right now to provide school districts greater flexibility as we plan forward. The state education department also came out with a pretty comprehensive document called Recovery, Rebuilding, and Renewing the Spirit of New York Schools. It's a pretty extensive document, 160 plus pages, which we actually have used as the guardrails in developing our plans. So the state education plan document is a significant one. There's a link to this document. And once, by the way, once our plan is in a final state and submitted, this entire document and all these links will be available on the district website for people to access and look at those documents separately. But certainly if you go into the state education department, this document is readily available for the public viewing. The portals for our plan submission, and that's somewhat of a misnomer. It's an attestation document that we have to say we are testing that we're doing certain things, and then we will be linking our plan in a web-based format on our website available for public viewing at some point in July. However, the portals were open on the 17th. The deadline for plan submission is July 31st. So you see that very short window, relatively short window, for us to get a lot of information together moving forward. The third entity that impacts what we do as a school district is the state health department, Department of Health. And the Department of Health also came out with a very comprehensive guidance for in-person instruction. And we have been looking at that guidance. And so we have 2 different guidance documents, and looking at those 2 different guidance documents and ensuring that there's consistency between the 2 documents in terms of our interpretation and our application to the plan. And the document, as you see here, has some pieces that are mandatory pieces that we have to do, and there's some recommendation pieces we have to do as well. And so we looked at those very closely and very clearly. We have also been working regionally with the Capital Region BOCES, and quite frankly, with the 3 surrounding BOCES, which is probably about 130 school districts, to try to have a very regional approach to what we do. Because we recognize that what we do here at Shenandoah impacts our neighboring district, be it Mechanicville, or neighboring district, be it Boston Spa, Burn Hills, Saratoga, any of those kind of things. And so the regional approach became a very important part of the conversation. And yes, it made the challenge more so. However, we know that it also lends to a better process, a better outcome as we move forward. So the BOCES reopening guidelines that summarize many cases, the state education department document and the health department document became important for us as we move forward. So another component that we did, and most of you on this call probably responded to it, we completed a pretty significant survey. We had almost 1,800 respondents to that survey. A large majority of the respondents were parents, as you see here. And the thing that we anticipated that there would be a mix of perspectives in terms of people's confidence in returning to school. And this is not necessarily confidence in the Shen plan, so to speak, because quite frankly with you, our plans are in many cases similar to what's happening across the state, if not across the country. It's more so where people are in their personal situation in terms of having students return to school. And you see here that 17% people are very confident, 20% people are confident, 28 unsure, 27 still not confident, lacking, need more information, things of that nature. And we have about 6% who at this point basically saying that they will not be sending their students back to school. And so this information is good for us because in many ways, this information also mimics what we're seeing across the country. Recognizing, folks, that and when you think about across the country, the situation in New York in terms of infection rate is the best in the country and probably, quite frankly, could be the best in the world from a large region versus some of the southern states that are seeing spikes and significant spikes. And so this confidence level varies not only how people view their region that we're in, but also people's perception from a national level as well. So we're keeping that in mind as we plan forward. A second piece that we want to find out, because we know that a major part of this planning process is our capacity to bring kids to school, transportation. And this was an interesting one. You see almost an even split between parents who are willing to have students ride buses back to school versus those who are saying that, you know what, I'll drive my child back to school. And so again, we have to keep in mind there are a lot of factors that go into that as well. And some people who responded to this, quite frankly, don't have students, and so subsequently it wasn't applicable to them. Device is a big piece. Access to computer devices is a big piece of this. About 90% of our hosts of those who responded saying that they have a device at home, and so something that we're constantly focused on in terms of if we're in a virtual situation or remote learning to ensure that students have access to education becomes an important piece of it. As I noted before, there were many pages of comments, and we spent hours of combing through the respective comments to do a couple of things. One, to see how many of those comments would have already been addressed in the presentation that we're going to have today, and two, to see what new items that people may have brought to our attention that for whatever reason we didn't consider before. So in the third part of it then is also to try to summarize, recognizing that there could be many people asking about masks. So instead of listing mask 100 times, we list mask one time. And so a lot of time was spent combing through all those questions to come up with a summary list of comments here. I share this because I want to ensure that people know that when they submit information to us, we look at that information, we comb through the information, we use the information to guide our decision making as we move forward. And so many of the things that people asked about or commented on, quite frankly with you, we were already planning to address or in the process of developing plans to address as a part of the reopening plan. So again, this is a summary of some of the things, some of the comments that people made as they go through. There were also a series of questions that people ask. You know, what would a classroom look like? How many kids would be in a classroom? All those are, again, questions that we have in our plan or anticipate to address within our plan as well. So again, I just want to emphasize the point that when people submit questions or comments to us, we ask for those comments, we ask for those questions because we use it to be instructive, to guide our thinking, to guide our planning, and subsequently to guide our decision making as we move forward. So you see the series of questions. I won't necessarily go through all the questions, but just to give you indication that those questions were taken into consideration. So with that being in mind, the State Department of Health came out with various protocols. And just to give you an indication, I won't necessarily click every link on this presentation, but for instance, they came out with a protocol, and I'm just going to go to their site, that guidance for office-based work. This protocol was initially used when we started bringing office staff back to work on site, on school site. And so again, it's important for people to know that as we develop our plan is actually based upon protocols that's being issued by the respective departments. It's not I as superintendent or any of our administrators making it up as we go along. It's truly looking at those regulations, looking at those requirements, and then trying to figure out how do we best apply those things to the school district. A prime example of that right now, we have through our extended school year program for certain special education students. Those students are on site, or some of those students are on site. And so we develop strict protocols for those students. And this is just an example of that, where we frame protocols, again, using the health department specifications to develop those protocols for having students on site. It's important for you listening to know that we're developing protocols for everything. We're developing training protocols for employees. We'll be putting out training videos in advance of staff and teachers coming back on board in terms of training related to COVID, training related to talking to students. All those type things we're in the process of developing, either here at Shen or tapping into our regional resources. Health screening is a big part of the Department of Health protocol. And right now we have a health screening mechanism. I myself, as superintendent, every morning I get an email, at least no later than 5 a.m. in the morning, with a link to our health screening tool. And this is just an example of that. Everyone gets to have to certify every day. And this is going to be an expectation for every employee coming back to the school district to each morning do the health screening certification online. And so we're doing that right now with any employees that are currently coming back to the school district to work on site. Every morning, they must do a health screening piece of it. So that's a big piece of it. Temperature checks for employees is something that we're in the process of looking at now, getting clarification, as well as for students. The regulations now speak to having those things prior to arrival at work. And so subsequently, that screening document talks about one of the signs of COVID is a temperature of 100 degrees or higher. So if you don't have that, you'll be checking that off in that health screening piece. And the only way you know that you don't have a temperature is to check your temperature. So that's also part of the health screening process as well. So those are all protocols that are coming from the Department of Health as we move forward through the process. Face covering required for students and staff. Right now, yes, the expectation is that each person will be wearing a student and staff. We have here, hopefully you can see it, and maybe you can't see it, but we have a protocol. We have a face covering for all our students and staff. And this is an example of that. Hopefully you can see this. It may be a little bit small, but basically we'll be creating having masks done for every student, every staff by buildings with the respective building names on them. So that, again, we want to make sure that when we asking people to do something, we're providing them the face covering to do so. That's a big piece of the protocol, and we're taking the extra step of making the Shen quote unquote mask for our students and staff. And so those will be available for distribution. Spatial relations is a big one in terms of maximizing social distancing. We spend a lot of time walking into different classroom spaces, different office spaces, looking at spatial relations to ensure of those things as well. So here's an example. And again, I'm hoping this picture is clear, of looking at an elementary classroom and looking at the 6 feet progression from head to head in different angles for elementary classrooms. And so those things are happening. So we're not simply making an assumption about it. We're actually going into those spaces and measuring spaces, moving things out of spaces, decluttering rooms so we can maximize the floor space in classrooms to create that. And right now, the sweet spot that we have seen is, my apology there, folks, that we have generally seen is that within classroom, the spatial relationship is about 18 desks per classrooms. Yes, we do have spaces that can have more than 18. And in those situations, we'll be trying to maximize those beyond 18. We have some spaces that frankly can have spatial relationships of up to 20, 22. And so we'll be looking at those spaces as we move forward. But generally, the capacity rating that we're using right now for planning purposes is 18. Again, here's a picture of the middle school one, just for folks who may be wondering. As you notice, middle school and elementary school and high school, you see difference in walls in terms of decorations and things that teachers put. Again, the similar spatial relationships that you saw in the elementary, you also see in the high school one as well. Similarly, at the high school, this is a picture of a high school. classroom. Again, you see we have gone through and looking at those sequences as well. It's important for people to know that we are doing these things. That person and myself as superintendent have gone into many classroom spaces and looking at repurposing spaces where we can, be a gymnasium, libraries, computer labs, trying to maximize space to try to bring students back on site. Similarly, we have gone into office spaces and workrooms. This example of a high school West workroom, we've gone in, restructured things to create either through physical barriers and space from head to head, 6 feet to 6 feet, to create again that social distancing, spatial relationships that we want in spaces. So those things are happening as we move forward in office spaces and in workroom spaces and classroom spaces as well. Reducing transition is a big part of the health department protocol and avoiding congestions. And so locker rooms, trying to no use of locker rooms, hallways, trying to reduce transitions in hallways is a big piece of it. One-way directional, trying to avoid bidirectional hallways as much as possible as we move forward. Again, these are part of the health department protocols that we're trying to put in place for the school district. A big part of the health department protocol, health services. So we're working on respective plans right now. Rebecca Carmen's been working very closely with nurses to come up with protocols for recognizing signs and symptoms, protocol for health hygienes. We have a video that we'll be pushing out to students and to faculty, looking at protocols related to vulnerable populations, people who may have severe illnesses that, should I say, increased risk for severe COVID illnesses as a result of pre-existing conditions. So we're looking at protocols surrounding those things as well. Looking at protocol related to contact tracing and the importance of having people sign into buildings. Yes, I know that's new and different for many employees, but that will be a requirement. People need to sign in so we know who was where and when and how. So if we ever have a situation of a case, we can quickly go back and backtrack and see who was in certain spaces when, and so subsequently contact tracing becomes a very viable option and an easy option for us as well. So we're looking at those type things as we move forward. Creating a lot of return to work protocols as well as a part of our health services piece. Looking at protocols dealing with school closures. And a lot of this will be guided by the Department of Health in terms of what are the triggers in terms of when schools are closed. Those are yet to be defined, and we're working with our respective health departments, be it the county health or the state health department, to come up with those protocols. Mental health is a big part of that piece as well, to ensure that we're looking at a mental health capacity, and not only mental health from the standpoint of students, but also from the standpoint of our employees. Disinfecting is a big part of it. The state health department, just to give you an indication, came out with guidance. We're looking at a lot of guidance documents in terms of how we clean spaces, how we disinfect spaces. Those are guidance document that we're following very closely. Daily disinfection of spaces. We have this is just a brief video. I just want to show, hopefully this will show, maybe it's, actually this video won't progress, but we have a video that we have to show that we purchased machines that can sanitize large spaces and buses very quickly. So a lot of investment has already been made to purchase a lot of new specialized equipment for a purpose of disinfecting spaces in between classes, in between bus runs, things of that nature. Having cleaning products available for people to clean personal spaces, be it your desk, your computers, all those things are going to be readily available for people to do so. Even protocol related to maintenance and grounds, filtration and ventilation. We spend a lot of time with our service contractor looking at our filtration system. Already, Shen was already ahead of the curve. We were already changing filters twice a year. When you think about your own personal filter at home, most people only change their filters in their be it once a year. At school district, we were doing it twice a year. Now we're going to be doing it 4 times a year. So basically every quarter we're changing filters. We have upped the ante on the filtration system that we have. If some of you heard the news that the state required for malls to have a certain ventilation system, we are meeting and are exceeding those requirements as a school, as well as ventilation in terms of fresh air coming into buildings. So all those are things that we're working on right now as we speak. Movement and deliveries to school. We try to minimize people coming into the school environment as much as we possibly can. So very limited visitors to school unless for official business will be the protocol moving forward. Transportation is a huge part of this process. And so we're in a process right now of looking at transportation capacity, where yes, students will be required to wear a mask on the school bus. Yes, I know for some parents and some students that might be a challenge. However, that's a requirement, and we'll be looking to uphold that requirement as much as we can. And so we'll be asking parents in advance of asking and informing your young student or child to be prepared for that as well. We're looking at bus capacity at around 50% on average. We recognize that could be higher, particularly since siblings are allowed to share seats on a bus. And so we're looking at those capacity as we move forward, as well as disinfecting buses is a big piece of those kind of things. And yes, we will be encouraging parents to transport their students. And yes, it will create more traffic on campus. We recognize that. However, we recognize the safety concern as well. Food service is a big part of the process. And so we're going through the process right now of seeing how do we best serve food in a socially distanced situation. So cafeteria is being spaced out. We're counting the number of heads in terms of if you have spatial relationship, how many students can we have in a one cafeteria at a particular time. Prepackaged meals to avoid congregation in lines as much as possible. Smaller groupings of maybe meal delivered to classrooms. All those things are what we're in the process of developing those very specific detailed plans for as we speak. So again, for parents and who are teachers on the call who are wondering about those things are being taken into consideration. Even food service, even for teachers who bring their meals to school, we're looking at how do we look at spaces that things can be stored so we don't have people congregating in small workroom, quote unquote, cafeterias as well, and violating the spatial relationship pieces. So we're looking at that as well as we speak. So with all that being said, those are a lot of the operational type things that we've been working on. And I just want to emphasize again that everything that we're doing is either by Department of Health, New York State Department of Health, New York State Education Department, the Governor's Office, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. And so we're looking at all those type things, all those guardrails, all those guidelines to develop the various plans that we have. And we're trying to be as comprehensive as we possibly can, recognizing that this is truly an evolving process. And we'll be working through these details through the month of August, and quite frankly, in some cases, details even through the month of September. So with that being said, that's the operational pieces, so to speak, to get us up to running and having students and staff back in a safe environment. And a key part of that is safety, folks, because at the end of the day, I value your safety as much as I value my safety. And I know that may sound to some as not as important or significant, but it's absolutely so. Personally, myself, I'm in the office every day, and I've been in the office every day since March 13th. And I certainly recognize that the only way I can sit and say we're doing certain things is to see those things myself and experience those things myself and be in those spaces myself. So when I say to you as employees, you as parents, you as stakeholders, you as students, that we're trying to do the best we can, I can sincerely say it because I'm invested in the process personally as superintendent. And every administrator is invested in the process. All hands are truly on deck to try to address as many things that we can humanly possibly address in an effective manner. And when we see gaps, admit that those gaps exist and try to mitigate those gaps in different ways. So the process is ongoing. The process is comprehensive, and we will be continuing to engage stakeholders in the conversations directly as well as indirectly, such as the meeting today. So at this point, I'm going to transition and pivot, if you will, to Dr. Wood, who has been charged with looking at everything instructional, working with her team to talk about how we look at equity and opportunities and outcomes for our students. So Dr. Wood, if you could please pick up at this point, and I'd be more than happy to transition the slides for you.
Okay, great, thank you. So we learned a lot from the spring when we did our quick pivot to online learning. And we heard a lot from our teachers who had young children, but also our families who were teaching kids at home, and heard loud and clear, our youngest learners really need maximum amount of in-person contact time with teachers to the extent possible. And certainly we weren't the only ones that heard it. As Dr. Robinson said, we're looking at this from a very regional approach, working with surrounding school districts. There's a strong emphasis to have K-5, K-6 back on site every day across the region. Also a strong emphasis on making sure that all students are engaged, certainly here in person where feasible, and then if we have to transition back to virtual, making sure that all students are engaging in the learning as we go. Special education, already noted that K-6 would be back every day on site in person, but our special education students in some of our specialized programs, FSD, ISD, MOVE, even in grades 7 through 12 will be back daily. Also, again, very sensitive to the needs of individualized students and the fact that some students really need in-person support. Also, our English as a new language support will continue as we transition back into school. We are currently talking about what we can do in terms of supporting online learning for vulnerable populations of students, looking at taking a regional approach there, where there may be opportunities for students to learn online where they have the demonstrated need. And that continues to evolve. We asked a question on the survey about access to technology. We know a number of families reached out in the spring saying that they would benefit from added support, and I would say at the elementary level, because at grades 6 through 12, students already had a one-to-one device. We were able to supply Chromebooks to families who stated that they had a need. And we will continue to look to do so in the event we have to transition to solely online again, if the rates across the region go up and the governor closes schools in person again. We are having a lot of conversations about what the curriculum should be in person, and making sure that we have our prioritized curriculum, that what we're focusing on is standards-based and really addresses the question of, is this something that's really essential for a student to know when they move on to the next level? And when the answer to that question is yes, that becomes prioritized in terms of being presented by the teacher, classroom teacher. Dr. Robinson, if you could flip the slide. Thank you. We made some decisions about grading in the spring, recognizing that this was an entirely new experience for students and for families and for our teachers. And it led to the use of an evidence of learning not yet learned grading scale, probably very appropriate for the spring. However, we know that we're looking for something more detailed and nuanced as we move into the fall. Dr. Robinson, maybe you could open up that standardized grading rubric template. Just give folks a preview of what that looks like. We're looking at transitioning to various levels of learning, like a 5 through a not submitted. And you'll see where, the 5 kind of there's descriptions that go around this language. So we're continuing to refine that type of grading rubric, particularly for use at the high school, but also taking a look at it at the elementary level. There will also be grading guidelines that are issued for teachers and for students to be aware of as well, and families. So folks are aware of how their assignments and assessments will be scored. We do intend to issue report cards on the traditional cycle moving forward. We also are working on developing best practices for online learning. Like I mentioned before, we learned a lot from what we did from March, 16th through the end of the school year. Have also been able to secure a lot of resources that talk about the best approaches. We know that students need synchronous instruction. We also know that some families benefit from asynchronous instruction, and so there would be a combination of both in the event we have to go out again. But for the K-5 or K-6 that would be back in person full-time, obviously their lessons, much of their learning, at least a good share of their learning, the time that they're with us would be synchronous. There is a strong emphasis on integrating social emotional learning as we look to transition students back into school, even looking at some days to orient students, the return to school time in September, making sure all students feel comfortable returning to their learning environment, and providing opportunities for teachers to walk students through. This is how we function in the classroom that is socially distanced. This is how we, when we put on our masks, this is the direction we move in this hallway, so that when students come, when school kicks off, people have increased sense of confidence and comfort coming back into the school. We also will continue to emphasize making sure that our teaching is culturally responsive and promoting equity in terms of outcomes for all students. We're going to be working with teachers on when to record and post Google Meet videos. And that's really very specific for 7-12, where some students will be in school and some will be home, learning from home. We are working on sharing guidelines with teachers grades 4 through 12 on Google Classroom setup. And I say grades 4 through 12 because we use Google Classroom platform. Grades 4 through 12, we have adopted a new software for our K3, kindergarten through 3rd grade levels, so that teachers have one common platform to post their lessons and gather information should we be at home again, that students can upload their material to. It should help organize the experience for our youngest students and their families, and also our teachers as well, who did a great job trying to find resources in the spring, but we knew that that was an area we needed to address. So standardization in terms of Google Classroom setup, so that when students go into the platform, they can expect common setup across all of their courses. We also are working on a pretty comprehensive professional development plan for our teachers, teaching in extended blocks of time, social emotional learning, how to use Google Classroom, and Seesaw, which is the online platform for K3. So the tent posts that we're putting up, I'm sorry, we're just shifting here. We were really thinking about what can we do and how can we do it well with elementary, and it required a lot of thinking about what did our facilities allow. And so with this, we've had 2 elementary principals, Andy Hills and Greg Pace, looking really extensively at what was possible, K5, and we will address grade 6 as we move on to a middle school conversation with Principal Robin Gores. But first I would ask Mr. Pace and Mr. Hills to jump in and share some of the steps that they have been taking as they've worked to have kindergarten through 5th grade back in school.
The first thing that we were working on is the space availability in the building and respecting and meeting the social distancing requirements. So we went through a process, and actually, and you saw a picture of it, of us putting desks in the room and meeting that 6 feet requirement. So we were able to get eventually those 18 desks in there, which was exciting. We then had to look at, if you looked at that classroom, especially an elementary classroom, which typically has quite a bit in it, was pretty bare in comparison to a typical room with a rocking chair or some other items as well. So we had to look at storage, and we then looked at the staffing ability. And then we looked at, eventually, once we got through that, we were starting to look at the delivery. How are we going to deliver that instruction? So it was a step-by-step process, and the initial step, the most important one, was that social distancing requirement.
And, you know, looking at the process, just to follow up with Greg there a little bit, the delivery model is certainly going to be, I don't want to say the most challenging, but it's the most detailed that we need to go through. And Greg and I and other principals and small groups are really looking to brainstorm as much as we can to make it as effective as we can, because we saw our challenges when we went virtual. When we bring students back in a different manner, obviously, we want it to be as effective as it can be. Obviously, with the mindset of keeping things safe and for everybody. But even as this week rolls along, at the end of this week, Greg and I are going to sit with some representatives from teachers to try to brainstorm some ideas, some different instructional delivery ideas. We have ideas. We have a lot of ideas, and we have ideas that are connected from the region. We have ideas that are connected to what we think can work well at Shen. And we're really excited for that because there's lots of energy in bringing these students back, seeing these kids in front of us. There is some excitement, I think, that we have. Even at Orangen, having the ESY program here, seeing students in the hallway, it's invigorating. So still lots more information that needs to roll out, that needs to be vetted. It's very important that we are going to vet these things as groups of teachers and administrators together. That's what we do here at Shen. You know, we're working on even special areas and what those look like. Certain requirements for our space is going to initiate some creative thinking needs. But as I said, it's all of these plans are going to be deeply vetted, connected to multiple stakeholders, and certainly looking at our needs for health and safety.
So that transitions us to the next slide. Thank you. And what are some of the health and safety considerations as we look to bring our students back on campus?
Go ahead, Greg. No, please. Yes.
No, well, it's the social distancing. You know, obviously, we're looking at, you know, no mass groupings together. So when we're looking at kids coming off of buses, that would be considered a mass entrance into the school. What do our dismissals look like? We're not going to have hallways flooded with students. So you're talking about a graduated process to get kids off of the bus. When we look at, you know, cafeteria, edits are going to be happening as far as our lunches go. So social distancing is going to be the key to anything that we're going to do. We have plans in place to limit that hallway thoroughfare. You know, there's not going to be the numbers of students in the hallway with the plan that we're looking at. So along with that, when we talk about, you can kind of twist safety around a little bit, but because of those changes that are coming in, the social emotional health of students and the educator is at the head of that room. That all counts. That's all going to matter. And that's why that feedback from the educator in this process and more when we meet with them on Friday is going to be important. So they can give some feedback and kind of finesse the ideas that we're looking at.
Yeah, thank you. And so to emphasize the point that I've heard you both make is that you're meeting with a group of teachers who are coming in to help problem solve, offer their expertise, and help do some creative scheduling work toward the end of the week. And so we also, I know, have talked about if we were to go back to the virtual at some point, say, you know, again, the governor comes in and says, it was great you were able to come back. However, we now need to close schools again for a couple of weeks. What are some of the things that we are considering if we have to move into that realm of instruction again?
So to go right to the beginning of maybe our process, we were very committed, I think, as a group here at Shen to say that kindergarten through 6th grade, we need to find a way to get them here as often as we can, as long as we can, you know, as a regular school day, because that is a help of the public good. That's a commitment to our youngest students and what they need, social, emotional. But also right from there, we have been focusing all of our planning and our ideas on how to pivot out of in-school learning back to that out-of-school learning with the virtual learning, because all of our ideas have to have a way to solve multiple issues. So this emphasis is the importance of synchronous and asynchronous learning. We need to look at how to create greater contact time with the teacher that's meaningful when we're doing things from home. That was a big piece that we saw too when we asked our parents to help us understand what virtual learning was like at home. So those are the pieces from our schedule and what will be happening at school, because at school there'll have to be some type of hybrid learning environment here with a little bit of virtual as well as the contact time of teachers if we have smaller amounts of students in rooms. So that's, like I said, I don't mean to be too vague on it, but that's how we have to look at pivoting from one platform to another, keeping those synchronicities of learning together.
Thank you. And I know a priority right now, you know, as you alluded to, the initial was making sure we had space for all the students, and that you have both worked with the elementary principals to creatively look at all spaces in the school. what a space may have been used for X originally, and now it may be a homeroom section or a classroom section, because we have had to look at all spaces flexibly to make sure we can socially distance our students and get them all back to school. Thank you. Thank you to Mr. Hills and Mr. Pace, and to the teachers who are going to be offering their input later in the week as we look to build this kind of return to school model for K-5. And that leads us to a grade 6. We're actually moving on to the middle level, but we'll first ask Robin Gories, principal of Gowanna Middle School, to start by addressing grade 6, because grade 6 is going to look different. Grade 6 is going to be an everyday on-site model. And Mrs. Gories, if you could just speak very briefly to the developing plans for grade 6.
Sure, sure. You're going to hear a lot of similarities to what you heard Greg and Andy talk about. First of all, is that we are working to have them back full time as well. And similar to the elementary schools, we are looking at all spaces creatively, because we do have to limit the amount of students within the classroom. And in order to have the 6th graders spread out, that's going to mean then that we're going to need to be looking at all spaces, and some of our classrooms may be repurposed, and some of our alternate spaces are going to definitely be repurposed. But we want to assure folks that we are going to be starting off with some type of a student orientation for our grade 6. We think that's really important. That tour is really important for our 6th graders, and we recognize this. This is a time for the kids to come to a new school and learn about new courses and teaming, et cetera. So we do recognize the importance of that. And like the elementary, we do have some ideas, but we will be working with teachers in the coming days to kind of take that deeper dive and look at the scheduling options, some of the things that we've already come up with. But we have a very open-minded to it, but we are looking at larger blocks of instruction time, and you're going to see something that I'll be sharing in a second about the 7th and 8th grade. But there's a lot of similarities to this larger block of instruction for our 6th grade students as well. And again, we will be looking at minimizing the cohort group of students each day. We will be extending our passing times, and we definitely want to stagger the release time into the hallways. So even if our 7th and 8th grade is split in half, we still will have our entire 6th grade population here. So staggering that release time, we think, is really important to maintain the social distancing. And then I can kind of segue into the 7th and 8th grade, if that's okay, because again, you're going to see some similarities here too. Again, that spacing is and the classroom space is going to be really key in terms of our creativity. And once we have finalized a schedule, it will be the next step will be, or one of the next steps besides staffing, will be looking at our spacing for that. Again, minimalizing our cohort groups, extending our passing, staggering release for the 7th and 8th grade. But we do want to consider the number of classes students are responsible for when they're here, when they're in school, when they're out of school. We do, for 7th and 8th grade, want to ensure that in-person synchronous learning as well as the asynchronous instruction that will go on. But while at home, students will have academic expectations, and we're hoping to have some access to teachers in real time as well, because we know that that's really important for our students. And we will have attendance be taken every day. So some similarities to what we had into the spring, but some changes too. And obviously some of the key, I think, that you heard me mention, as well as Greg and Andy, is that we do have some collaboration later this week with some great faculty members who will be working with us to kind of tackle this scheduling portion of the reopening. You can go to the next slide. So here you have, and again, this is for specifically the 7th and 8th grade, because as I said before, the 6th grade will be coming in every day, but we will be assigning each 7th and 8th grader to a cohort group. And 7th and 8th grade, so we'll have half of the student population will report for 2 consecutive days. So they'll go to 4 classes on one day, and then the other 4 classes on the next. And then there'll be one group of students that will be home at that time. And then we'll reverse for the next 2 days. So you'll attend for 2 days, then you'll be home for 2 days, and then you'll attend for 2 days, and you'll be home for 2 days. And that cycle will continue. And then there will be some expectations, some academic expectations for the students while they're at home. And if you want to go to the next slide. So as you can see, and again, this is just a draft to kind of get us started as we move into later in the week, but we're looking at the students having 4 different blocks of time in which they would have 4 different classes. And this could work similarly for our 6th grade as well. And like I said, they would have 4 different classes and on each given day, but there would definitely be some responsibility for the students at home to be doing some type of either extension from their work while they're at home. And again, we're hoping that there might be some live instruction or live time that they would be able to meet with their teachers as well. So this is something, and again, you see that increasing the amount of passing time, which we feel is the only way that we would be able to ensure that any time. But as you can see, this schedule will really allow for students to be isolated more, and it will give both students and teachers more minimal contact with other folks throughout the day.
Thank you, Robin. I would also say that I know you and the team took into consideration some of the feedback we got from students this spring when they were running through 9 periods a day while they were at home, and teachers as well, the fact that it felt somewhat overwhelming. And so if we were to have to transition entirely to virtual, we know at the 7-12 model, we're looking at students being virtual 2 days and then in school 2 days, that the 4 block is, an approach that should give students more opportunity to focus deeply on certain subjects, and the same for teachers in terms of their preparation, depending on how things go moving forward. Another thing I want to point out, as we've mentioned it a few times in the presentation, synchronous and asynchronous instruction. When we're speaking about synchronous, we're talking about live, real time, like those of you who are watching on the live stream right now. We are speaking to you in real time right now. That is synchronous. Asynchronous would be if you were watching a recorded video that had been posted and you could watch it at any point. So reviewing the recording of this after the fact would be considered asynchronous. So now we will transition to a very brief overview of what the high school will look like. And we have Mr. Agostinoni from the high school here to kind of walk through some of the thinking behind the development of the draft high school schedule. So Mr. Agostinoni.
So what is nice to follow Andy, Greg, and Robin is that a lot of the thinking has been the same. One thing I'll point out that we have spoken about, all of us on this call, we put it on the top of our whiteboard whenever we meet, is student experience, because we can come up with the 10 posts or guidelines, and depending how we do them, it can impact student experience. We're trying to balance the student experience with public health and all the guidelines, and there is that fine balance. We try to keep that student experience in mind, and different at different levels. But our students are going to be returning to something at the high school and at the other levels. It's not something they left. So when they left on March 13th, when they return on whatever the day may be, it's going to look a little different. So we try to keep that in mind. And we've gone through a number of the things. We've looked at spacing and staffing, and we did the same thing. You saw the picture of the rooms and in our workrooms. We're really trying to offer our full course load is what we're trying to do in the high school, and being able to reduce to 50% allows us maybe to get into that, because we know that at the high school level, at all levels, right, but just speaking specifically to high school, some of the things that students are used to might not be here, be it sports or musicals or drama productions. We're not 100% sure how that is going to look or look at all. So we want to make sure we, again, don't take away some courses that students have been looking forward to. So we really want to try to offer everything in our course catalog that students signed up for, intending to take, and not just what they have to take in order to graduate. So, you see this, the recommendations or guidelines, they're no different here. So you can go to the next slide. Same ideas as as Robin pointed out, 2 days in, they would be running their A-day schedule. So they're 1 through 4, and then they're 5 through 8, and then the next group would come in, so on and so forth. And if you move to the next one, what's important to say, and Robin already pointed out, we're reducing, if we do this, reducing contact between teachers and students by about 50%. So you're not going to come into contact with 5 of your classes, and at 50%, whatever it be, might be 60 or 65 students, you'll come into contact with 2 classes or 3, and half the amount of students. So from a public health standpoint, that kind of speaks for itself. But also, as mentioned, social emotional learning, if we were to not look to make any adjustment and increase passing time, our kids would be transitioning 10 times a day, filling hallways 10 times a day, and sitting in class for, only around that 30-minute mark, 32 minutes or whatever it might be, with all the other, precautions we have to do. Plus, we would then have to sanitize our rooms and clean them 10 times a day instead of 4. So there's a number of things. We could talk about public health, but we're educators. I think from the returning kids to school and the social emotional aspect, what you see on the screen does make a lot of sense, even taking the public health stuff out of it, which obviously is kind of ruling our direction here. So I know I don't want to spend too much time in high school. I know we got elementary folks on here, but that's kind of what we're looking at high school, very similar to the other buildings.
Great, thank you, Ron. Dr. Robinson, if you don't mind just going back one slide, I just want to clarify something. Yes, right there, thank you. That was said where, or on this screen, it may be confusing to folks where it says classes AM and then classes PM. It's really what the current periods 1 through 4 would have been, and then they go into what the classes 5 through 9 would have been, or thereabouts. Just didn't want anybody confused, because on that day 1, that group of kids would be coming in all day. Day 2, that same group of kids would come in the next day and be here all day and get the rest of their classes they couldn't get that first day. So we continue to work on graphics, visuals that make things clearer to our public as we are kind of working through this ourselves, trying to figure out what scheduling models will work best. I do want to, before we transition back to finish up and then take some questions at the very end, want to go back to Mr. Hills and Mr. Pace, because we had a number of conversations about what would be the area of focus for our teaching come fall, particularly knowing we were out for several months, and we want students to come back and have a rich instructional program. And so what would be the areas that we would intend to be focusing on, and why?
So what we're looking at is when we're going to be looking at the guidance that's going to drop from New York State. But right now our focus is to ensure that students have their ELA and math time. And then we talked about core. Sometimes people would say the primary, and that would get mixed up with primary and intermediate, but we talked about primary subjects. So when we looked at reading and math, it was very easy to fall on that, but we're in a time of a pandemic, and obviously the sciences are pretty important right now, and to actually turn our nose up and say that science doesn't matter right now is, I think, short-sighted on our part. And then when you think about the news, you would have to be a turtle in its shell not to realize that we have some important issues that are out there. So to think that the history is not important would be shameful. So then the core turned into those 4 items: ELA, math, social studies, and science. We have limitations as far as spacing. We are looking for the safety of our students and our staff. So, we can do anything. The question is, can we do everything? So as we look at meeting with teachers on Friday, we are going to be looking at those bigger picture items. Right now, I can honestly say we are committed to those 4 areas and making it happen in the elementary schools, and then we will start looking at those next steps.
Great, very helpful, thank you. So as you see, we are working under a number of parameters, SED parameters, Department of Health parameters, guidelines from the governor's office. We're going to continue to work with stakeholders, refine our schedules so that from an instructional perspective, we're ready to be back in school in September. So Dr. Robinson, back to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wood. Thank you very much, Andy, Greg, and Ron, and Robin. And again, to our teachers and whomever might be on the live stream, I think it's important for people to know that we are truly trying to exercise due diligence. We're exercising fidelity in our thinking, our actions. And yes, at times people say, why don't we have more people involved? At the end of the day, there's so much information that we're synthesizing and trying to make heads and tails of. And now we're at a point, as was noted several times over, that we'll be strategically engaging various stakeholders in those conversations as we deal with what I call the nuances of application, the things, those little things that make the biggest difference as we look to finalize our plans to move forward. I would also like to say that when we submit our plan to the State Education Department, and right now you'll see in a timeline for a second, we won't have many of these details. These are things, folks, that we'll be working through collectively through August and into September. So I don't want anyone to think that when we say we submitted our plan to the state that the work is done. We will continue to engage expertise from various faculty, staff members to ensure that we're doing it right, because this is an instruction decision, this is a transportation decision, it's a food service decision, it's an operation decision. It impacts every aspect of our system. And even financially, as we sit here now, we're still concerned in terms of what the state will do with the budget and the state aid, and what's the implication of that. And so we're planning with all those contingencies in mind. And we also recognize that there are a significant number of costs that every time we have a new mandate, that we have to take those costs into consideration. We're looking at contingency for staff. What's the implication if people are unable to return? And what's the implication of that? Looking at professional development, significant amount of money planned to be expended to ensure that we're positioning people for success. That's our goal. We want our faculty, staff, administrators to be in the best position to be successful. So investing in their success is a significant portion of those kind of things. Having multiple routes for transportation, significant cost difference. Retrofitting buildings for upgrading filtration, significant cost implication. Additional PPE, significant cost implication. So all these things, I'm saying to you that we're taking all those things in consideration, being very strategic about our thinking, our planning, because when we say we're doing something, we want to be able to effectively do it and do it well. And so those are some of the things I really want to emphasize. And the last bullet on this slide I want to emphasize, because we're getting tons of questions about why we're not allowing people to use our facilities. The bottom line is the New York State Health Department basically says that any of the guidelines that we articulated before for school opening, those same guidelines apply for any use of our facilities. In other words, we would have to do the temperature check. We'd have to do all those things if we allow people to use our facilities. And until we have those guidelines in place, until we are effectively ready to open our doors to our students, public use of facilities is still being closed. And so it's a question that people need to know. There's a difference between the commons or the public park versus school facilities. They're very much different entities and therefore different rules that apply to those utilizations. So the last couple pieces I want to go forward to questions. Again, we have a lot of meetings set up with the respective collective bargaining units. We're going to be having a lot of conversations formally as well as expertise of people as we move forward. We have several ad hoc groups working that we have several meetings already scheduled for the coming week. And the goal is, again, to have our plans submitted on Tuesday, the 28th. And the reason why we want to have some wiggle room, because the 31st is the deadline. If there are issues that we have time to make the modification to those issues, we have a special board meeting that will be overviewing the final plan, which is a lot of this presentation that you have here with the board. Again, we've had board members engage in conversations already as we move forward. We know that once we submit the plan, communication of it is going to be paramount. So having information on the website, social media, so people could see some more of the details that we are planning to move forward with. And clearly, the decision by the governor between the days of August 1st and the 7th become critical. The governor will make that decision, and based upon that decision, we will move forward accordingly. And we also recognize, as was alluded to, the opening of school this year will be different. We will need to dedicate time for staff training. We will need to dedicate time for student orientation. How much time, those things are still being decided, but we know we need to be able to dedicate that time accordingly. So we've had a series of questions, and Mrs. DeFiciano has been capturing some of those questions. Some of them have already been addressed, and I just want to quickly walk through those questions. For example, somebody asked, there's been talk that teacher desks will be removed from elementary and middle schools. Is it true? And if so, will there be time for us to go in and get those items? Right now, if there's a move of a teacher desk from a classroom, that teacher will be notified by the building principal. So that's a broad answer to that question as well. So some cases that have already occurred. We're trying to every classroom will have a desk. What we're trying to do is minimize other items within classrooms. Teachers were asked early in the spring to remove items once we went into the COVID-19 remote situation. So in many cases, people had already removed personal items. However, if there's still personal items, we will certainly be providing an opportunity for people to come in and do so. The respective principals will be in touch with staff accordingly. What will happen with gym, art, music, library? What will those things look like? Those are huge questions. And as was alluded to by Mr. Pace and others as well, those questions are things that we would look to answer as we move forward as well. So let me just stop presenting here for a second and go back to the full screen mode. And as Mr. Pace alluded to, we're looking at those type things. As Mr. Augustine alluded to, we're trying to provide a full complement as much as we can. Capacity will drive those things. Those are details that will happen as we move forward. We're not starting this out with, no, this can't happen. We'll start out with what can happen and working from that perspective. And so that's what we're trying to do. Mr. Colin has been engaged in conversation with phys ed. Frank Rizzola has been engaged in conversations with music. So we're trying to figure out how we best work within the parameters, how do we best work within the capacity that we have as we move forward. So those are answers yet to happen. Will we use computer labs for instruction? Yes, we're looking at those spaces right now, recognizing that we're looking at capacity for one-to-one, essentially for most, if not all students. And so, yes, computer labs will be used differently as we move forward as well. In the primary schools, we use a lot of manipulatives. Can put those manipulatives into plastic bags. Those are huge questions that falls into what I call the nuance category, right? Because as superintendent, I can't tell you what a first grade teacher would do with those things. A first grade teacher may have some really creative ideas of how we can do that without kids sharing items. And those are the type of things that, again, we'll be looking into the expertise for when we look at some of those things, such as manipulatives as we move forward. Will teachers will be able to remote with students who opt out? Yes, we're looking at that. We know that we will have some families who will opt out. And we have to figure out what's the best way to effectively do so. And that's a part of the virtual plan. That's also, we're looking at this happen, some regional resources to effectively do so as well. What type of protection will offer vulnerable support staff who work with students regularly? And again, we're looking at various PPEs. We have masks, we have shields, we have gloves, we have disinfectants. So we're looking at all those PPEs available for, and we're looking right now, we have the benefit of the ESY program. And looking at some of those same capacity that we provided for students in some of those teachers in some of those situations who are supporting vulnerable students. Just trying to go through this question to make sure that I try to address some things. Bathrooms and bathroom is a big question, right? So right now we're looking at bathrooms. The good thing is most bathrooms are either stalls. And so, however, we do have some situations where bathrooms aren't necessarily structured that way. So we're looking at how do we, quite frankly, to regulate particular student bathroom use. At the elementary level, it's easier because you have bathrooms attached to classrooms for the most part. So that's an easier proposition. At high school, bathroom use is something, ironically, that they're looking at right now. And also within bathrooms, we're going to the touchless paper towels. So a lot of transitions of equipment. These are huge cost pieces, by the way, as we move forward to again, making sure that disinfectant and hygiene is a priority as we move forward. Clean and spray used in classrooms. We're following all the specifications by the state health department and the CDC in terms of what we provide, and we will be providing those things readily, not only in classrooms, but in common spaces, putting up additional hand sanitizers on walls and hallways to ensure access is easy. Will teachers be asked to do any cleaning? Clean enough spaces of their desks and computers? Yes. So will we ask teachers to go in and clean every desk in the classroom? The answer is right now largely no, because if we follow a cohort model, kids will be in spaces longer, and between spaces we try to come in and disinfect spaces very quickly as well. But yes, we'll be expecting teachers to clean off their desk and their personal, what I call personal professional spaces as we move forward, and providing the equipment to do so. Same thing with soap dispensers, hand sanitizer, all those things are being reviewed, have been reviewed for the past several months. Thermometer and checking classrooms. That's a big question right now in terms of, that's the part of the health plan. Nurses are working with Rebecca Carmen to develop a very comprehensive plan when it comes to diagnosing or potential symptoms. Looking at spaces that if we have someone who might be demonstrating or displaying certain symptoms, that we can isolate in certain spaces. So we're looking at isolation spaces, either separate from the nurses' offices or within the nurses' offices. We're in a process of diagramming those things right now as we speak. Mask. A lot of question about the scientific research about mask and things of that nature. There's a lot of pieces, but we also know that wearing a mask is something that has shown to minimize the spread of infection. And so, yes, we will be providing a cloth mask. And as I said before, I have my Shen version here that every employee will have one. And some of you will have the name of your school on it, and some of you won't have your name of school on, but we'll be supplying one of those. So we're buying thousands of masks between employees and students to have people give them a washable mask with instruction to wash it. I've had this one, and quite frankly with you, I launder it on a regular basis, and it's in very good shape. It's designed to be laundered, so we know that. But we also know that people right now, because the state law requires you to wear a mask, so many people have many masks. Probably like you, I have a mask, 2 or 3 masks in my car. People have made masks. People have donated masks. And so we'll be making sure, though, as a precaution, that we have that. And quite frankly, it should be nice for kids to have their Orangen mask or their Guana mask as well. So we're looking to have that as we move forward. And regulation of masks is going to be something that we're going to have to look at. It's going to be everyone's responsibility, not only employees of the school district, but parents. And yes, you know, just like any other violation of the code of conduct now, we have rules, and there's always going to be exception to those rules, and we have to address those exceptions as such. And so, yes, those are conversations that build on principles we have with parents, in correspondence with parents as we get closer to opening day. So those are real conversations. Those are conversations as teachers. How do we get people? It's not a punitive thing, but how do we talk about the benefit of doing so? And quite frankly with you, many people are wearing them now. Probably not as much as they probably need to when they're in a school environment, but certainly when we have the 6-foot spacing, it allows for masks to be down when kids are engaged in eating, allows masks to be down. And so it's not a situation where thou shalt wear your mask every minute that you're here. We recognize social distancing is also a part of that as well. So we're trying to ensure that we're being reasonable on one side, but yet ensure that we're following the health regulations on the other side. Plastic shields, I mentioned before, we purchased quite a few that we're using some now in the ESY program, and we have some based upon people's work responsibilities we provided, as well, quite frankly with you, maybe some vulnerable situation that people may need that added dimension of wearing both a mask and a shield. Because right now the protocol is to wear a mask under the shield as we move forward. So we have enough shields to what we think for basically what we're anticipating for those employees who may need those. And if we need more, we'll plan accordingly as we move forward. Someone asked about report card format. Yes, that's a part of the grading process and elementary. it was moving to the 3 times a year. Yes, we're looking to continue with that piece at the elementary level. Erica Ryan and her team, could be others we're working with Erica, but name that's present in my mind right now. We're looking to continue to look at those kind of things. And once we finalize our plan, finalize our delivery model, all those things will come into play. And that's where, again, some teacher input will be significant in those things as we move forward. What if people don't feel safe coming back to school? Those are real conversations we all have every day. And so a big part of the piece too is that we have a responsibility to share what people are doing. So it's different points. We'll be making videos of what does it look like to be in the hallways? What does it look like to be in a classroom? To again, provide that information so people could be more comfortable about being in the environment as we look forward. And we'll look at those exceptions as exceptions. And I don't want to minimize by when I say that we're planning for the presence of students and staff in school, and we'll deal with those situations as they arise as we move forward. Are teachers and staff protected from lawsuits if a student gets sick? The good thing is, if you work for the school district, you fall under the district liability umbrella. And so the simple answer is yes. And we're engaging in conversation. In fact, we have been engaging in conversation with our insurance company for a while now, because this is also a new arena for insurance companies as well. So the answer is yes. The larger liability covers all of us as we plan forward. Particularly, that's why we have to make sure that we're being consistent with the guidelines from the state health department, the guidelines from the state education department. We have to make sure that we're following those guidelines so we can then say, based upon those things, as well as other precautions we have taken, we're doing the best job we can. Will a presentation be available for? Yes, at some point, we will have this presentation. It probably won't be, could be maybe the beginning of next week, because there's some links that the links are still in draft format. And we'll be looking to try to get that presentation out as soon as possible, this presentation out as soon as possible, so people can look through those links and see some of those things as well. So we're certainly looking to do those kind of things. And the last 2 questions, in the event school closed and we have complete remote teaching, will teachers have the option to still use their classroom? In fact, that will be the expectation. The expectation, if the governor comes out on August 1st and say we have to go all virtual, I hope, and we're lobbying right now, that the governor will allow teachers to be on site, recognizing if you're on site in your classroom, that's ultimate social distancing, right? Because you're in the space by yourself. And so we're looking, hopefully that capacity will be allowed. And so people could come back, because we recognize that yes, while it was great for a teacher to invite a child into his or her home, we know that in many cases it was awkward for people to work from home in some of those situations. And so yes, we'll be looking to try to have as much on-site capability, capacity for people to remote out to our students as much as we can. And so that's something that we're planning for as we move forward as well, because we know that, I mean, that's part of the reason, quite frankly, with you personally, why I come to my office every day. 1, I like the peace and quiet, in particular in the beginning. And 2, in my house, I have all my kids home. I have 4 adults and my mother-in-law in the house. And, you know, nothing against mother-in-laws, but that's my wife's mother. And so for me, it's a challenge to be working out of my house. And so I know that. And so subsequently, we want to provide people the best situation to effectively do their jobs. And so, yes, that is a part of our planning process as we move forward. And the last question, if the need arises to go virtual, will the time guidelines for the week be the same as the spring? The answer is no. In the spring, we were pivoting, and quite frank with you, kudos to all our faculty, staff, parents, everyone. People embraced the pivot, recognizing, folks, that we were truly building the proverbial plane while we were flying it. And people did a great job of embracing it. So thank you all for doing so. And we have learned a lot from that. And so we're looking at those type things. We're looking at state regulations, because the state requirements are different now. As Dr. Wood alluded to before, the state's requiring us to have attendance every day, looking at the number of hours. And so we're working through those conversations right now regionally as we speak. In fact, I was on a call today with about 130 school district represented from about 130 school districts, and trying to make sure that we have a regional approach to those time guidelines. In other words, we can't have Shan saying, yes, every child will be online 6 hours a day, 5 hours a day, 3 hours a day, and then another school district have the complete opposite. And so we're trying to have more commonalities regionally than not. Yes, recognizing that in the spring things were different, but there was a lot of lessons learned from the experience in the spring. So a lot of folks will be engaged in those conversations as we move forward. So as this process evolves, I want people to have confidence knowing that we're not going into this with things carved in stone. Every day we are questioning the things that we thought about yesterday. Each day information is being clarified from the state level. The state is putting out different Q&A. We are questioning the state in terms of what do they mean by that? What's the implication of that? And we're evolving and enhancing as we move forward. The goal is do the portal submission to the state on the 29th of July. And from that point, we will continue to work on the detailed work. That's where I'm saying to folks on this call, this is where we want people to come with a solution-oriented approach to things, folks, because we will be doing things differently, period. I think people need to embrace that. We would do things differently, and we would do things better, and we would do things to provide a quality experience for our students. And I trust and hope that everyone appreciate that. That's our focus. Our focus is a very positive focus. Our focus is a very optimistic focus. And our focus is our very, very realistic focus as well, because we want to ensure that our students, you as employees, our families that send their children to us with blind faith, that we're doing what's in their best interest, that we're trying to effectively do so. And we will never put a situation where we're putting anyone in peril in doing their jobs, or put a person in a situation that they cannot do their jobs effectively as we move forward. So at this point, I'll just ask our panelists, as we look to wrap up this session, if there are any things, then I'm going to start with Andy Hills, then Greg Pace, then Ron, then Robin, and end with Dr. Wood. If there are any parting comments that you would like to share to our listeners.
You know, at this time, I think we still have a lot to do, certainly, but I think we have good teams together, and I think those teams are growing. Stakeholders are going to be together soon to keep the momentum going in a positive way for Shen.
Mr. Pace, thank you, Andy.
I think that what teachers have to know is we are going to be working with you. We don't want to present something to you and say we have all the answers. So on Friday, we are going to be working with those educators to say, here's an outline. We've got some guidance to follow. And then we're going to be getting suggestions from them. We're not going to be going in completely blind. There's going to be some very good foundation to build off of that we've created for them. And every idea, the one thing that Andy and I agreed on very early on is any idea had to solve at least two problems. We couldn't go in saying that, oh, this solves one problem, and then we create another. So at least by solving two problems, any angst that may happen at the other end, at least there's two things solved minimally. So we're pretty proud of what we have together so far, and we look forward to meeting with people on Friday.
Just to echo, and flexibility, and Greg used the term angst. It's very easy to lose sleep over this. I think we don't have to, because things change so quickly. So, just the flexibility and understanding that, as Dr. Robinson said today, is probably a little different than tomorrow, but our focus is on our students and our teachers, and we continue to work hard. And, thanks to the elementary principals working hard, as you know, I'll be sending some your way. So from both sides, as an administrator here at Chen, as a parent, I'm proud of the work that's being done. So flexibility is key.
And my parting thing that I was just thinking too is just that, as a student approaches and a staff approaches, we'll call our September, we think about the normal things that we bring to school, and things are going to change. And we K-12 will need to come up with some new guidelines that will be disseminated to all, mostly to our students, but developed by our staff and by administrators, just that this is what the new norm is. And that's going to be something that we will need all sorts of input on. Obviously going to start with our masks, but different types of things, from walking in the hallways to visitors coming into the school. But these are different things that it is a new norm, and we will have to develop that piece too. But I'm confident in the next couple of weeks we can have something put together that will make everyone feel safe, students and adults.
And Elizabeth, before you offer some comments, just Mrs. DeFisciani just emailed me a couple more questions that came in that I think is worthwhile addressing. People ask about bathrooms. Bathrooms will be cleaned around the clock. Custodial staff is geared up to clean what we call common spaces on a regular basis. People ask about PPE materials being provided. And I think I mentioned that before, that those things are available and we're getting more PPE materials as we speak. A good question, and I'm sure that high school is, and I relay this to the high school, not necessarily asking Mr. Guston to look at it now. Siblings, when they do the A-B day, if you have siblings in a ninth grade and in a 10th grade, or 10th grade, 11th grade, or twins, for example. So those are things that the high school group is looking at right now. Homework, yes, extension of the learning experience is something that's going to happen. The question is, how do we effectively do so? Is those are instructional delivery questions that academic administrators will be having by departments as we move forward. So more to come on that as well. Someone was very appreciative of Ron's comment about the student experience. I think we're all focused on the student experience. We want to have a quality experience for kids and not just simply bringing kids back to space as we move forward. APPR, quite frankly with you, the state hasn't said it officially yet that they abandoned it. But to be quite frank with you, I'm going to say this as superintendent, and I'm sure there might be some SED folks out there. At this end of the day, I have confidence that our folks, our teachers, are going to be the best they can be, and they have demonstrated in the past. So I have confidence that they will continue to do that. And the formalities of APPR, quite frankly with you, we're looking to saying those things could be very differently as we move forward, and they should be very different. At this point, the state haven't necessarily formally abandoned it. They delayed it because we didn't have test scores last year. We'll see how the rest of the year falls out. But quite frankly with you, on the priority list of things that we're looking at, that's not one of the things on the priority list right now. So whomever wants to record that and send it to the interim commissioner, they can absolutely do so. So that's not a priority right now. Our priority is to try to provide a quality experience for our students. And if we do that, your scores will reflect accordingly. Academic supports, we recognize that trying to address learning gaps is going to be a big part of that. And so how do we provide academic intervention supports is a big part of it. Special education supports is a big part of it. And so, yes, we're looking at those models very closely to ensure that students with needs, those services are following those needs very closely as we move forward. So those will be absolutely a priority as we move forward. Someone asked if we're going to 18, what happens? So essentially, basically, instead of having your typical rostering, and Mr. Pace and Mr. Hills could correct me, we're basically saying how many kids we have in 5th grade, and looking at the staffing capacity and distribute it accordingly. So it's not be a situation where someone may have 10 kids and someone may have 18 kids. We're looking at the distribution of kids across grade levels and trying to make sure we balance those things as we move forward. Even say, for instance, between Tasago and Scano, looking at spaces between sister schools and trying to maximize those spaces as well as we move forward to, again, try to create an even EVEN and quality experience for our students as we move forward. So those are some of the things that we're looking to do. Someone asked if it was live streamed, so I think this question came in before we live stream. It is being live streamed. It is being recorded. And the reason why we don't do Google Meets, imagine having 300 people on a Google Meet. It's not a very fun experience at all when you keep telling people to mute and you keep seeing the weird things in people's background when people don't realize that the video is showing. So that's the reason why we go to live stream with this process. Another series of questions, the last two that just recently came in, emergency drills. Yes, the state's still requiring us to have drills. We'll be doing those drills differently. Absolutely be doing those drills differently as we move forward, recognizing the cohort model, recognizing the safety issues that we have to, but we also recognize that we still need to do drills because the safety concerns that we had yesterday are still the same safety concerns we have today and we'll have tomorrow. So we have to figure out how we structure those drills within the respective limitation we have. Someone asked, will we terminate positions that we don't use? And I'm not going to say what titles they use because I don't want those people to get nervous. Our plan is not to terminate anyone in the sequence. Our plan is to repurpose expertise as much as we possibly can. And so someone said, if the library is used for classes, what happened to the librarian? Well, I'm sure like now our librarians, and I've seen them, are very skilled in many cases, run lessons right now in libraries. So we were looking at how do we integrate folks as a part of that experience for our kids. And so as superintendent, do I have all those details? No. Will building principal and department folks have those details? Absolutely. Before we have kids come back. So, but to put people at ease, our plan right now is we're not starting with a list of positions we're going to eliminate, because I think that one of the questions was alluding to that. And I don't want anyone to have that walking away from this conversation. Our focus is to try to maximize the talent of our talented employees as much as we possibly can. And I'm asking people to recognize the state also provided some flexibility that people can teach outside of certification. I think it's for 10 hours per week. And they recognize that school is going to need that flexibility. And quite frank with you, we're lobbying to basically get more flexibility, because we have some people who are tremendously talented that we could tap into their talents in different ways. And we want to be able to do so. So if there are people who have particular skills that, quite frank with you, that they didn't utilize as a part of their position role, and you said, hey, I can definitely do this, please step up to the plate right now and start sharing those things with their respective administrators, so we know what we have and how we can effectively use folks as we move forward. So that in a nutshell, put everything in context. There's a lot of details, folks, to work through, and we're committed to working through the details. We're having regional conversations. We're having statewide conversations. We're looking at different plans from across the country to figure out how different places are doing it. Just to give you context, I was on a call yesterday. The state of Georgia, the state of North Carolina, South Carolina, Arizona, all those states will be opening in mid-August, and I'm working, trying to figure out what they're doing, what they think is going to work best, what's not going to work so well, so we can not only learn what we're doing here regionally, but also what's happening in other states and the experiences that they're having, because they will open before us, and how can we take those lessons learned into consideration as we fine-tune our plan. So a lot of work, but yet the commitment is sincere. And I appreciate all those who took the time to stay with us on the live stream. And I ask, please stay with us. Stay with us in the sense that we'll work through all the things together. If there was a simple solution, we wouldn't have to be in this conversation. There isn't a simple solution. There isn't a single solution. We're trying to simply find the best solution for us here at Shen. So thank you very much for your time, for your participation. Thank you.